The UK government has put the army on standby to deliver fuel to petrol stations as motorists drain supplies across the country. Business leaders have also warned of winter food shortages due to a lack of lorry drivers and food processing staff. Ongoing issues with Britain's supply chain have resulted in empty shelves in supermarkets, and some restaurants are taking certain meals off the menu. One business in London has taken matters into its own hands to get the supplies it needs. Oliver Reagan has more.
Long days and very early starts. That's the reality for Humdinger's managing director, Robert Hunninger. The catering company, which also runs a bakery and soup kitchen, is one of many businesses struggling with stock shortages as the UK's supply chain creaks under pressure. It's left the boss with no other option than to get the items himself.
Most of the orders we put through now, we've got 10 items missing. For fruit and veg, I'm having to go to the fruit and veg market. Last week I went to 5 or 6 different cash and carries. When you're starting at 12 at night, 2 in the morning, and you kind of get home at 8 the next day, it's turning into a bit of a nightmare.
According to the Office for National Statistics, 7% of UK firms reported difficulties in obtaining raw materials, products or services this month. And food industry leaders believe this is a worrying sign ahead of the busiest part of the year.
We really started preparing for Christmas in the beginning of July and laying things like pigs and blankets down for the freezer. Because we haven't got the staff, no one started doing that. So we're already sort of 6 to 8 weeks behind with that production for Christmas. If you go into the supermarkets now, you'll find less choice. What you'll see at Christmas time is, fewer Christmas goodies on the shelves, I'm afraid.
One of the major issues causing the supply chain pain is a shortage of truck drivers. Thousands of European drivers went home during COVID-19 lockdowns and haven't returned. And new Brexit immigration rules are making it much harder for new drivers to work in the UK. Officials in that sector predict the disruption will continue into next year unless the government acts quickly.
It's essential that overseas drivers are allowed in on short-term visas between now and Christmas to plug this gap. Longer term, we need apprenticeships that will work for the system. Government needs to address that because it costs between £4,000 and £7,000 to train to be a trucker. Fresh blood is what we need, and we need it urgently.
The shortage of truck drivers delivering to places like this has resulted in wages skyrocketing. One UK firm hiked workers' salaries by 40% overnight. But these costs will inevitably land at consumers' feet as the prices of goods on the shelves will inevitably increase. Prime Minister Boris Johnson put Brexit point man Michael Gove in charge of fixing Britain's supply chain issues as part of a cabinet reshuffle. Businesses like Humdinger's need him to get to work immediately. It was told this week that the 45 turkeys it's ordered for Christmas aren't guaranteed to arrive. After COVID-19 ruined last year's festive period, this year's now also looks at risk. Oliver Reagan, TRT World, London.
Well, let's get more on this now with Vicky Pryce in London. She's an economist and board member at the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Welcome back to the program, Vicky. The UK really is in an extraordinary position right now where the army is actually on standby to deliver petrol to petrol stations because of a severe shortage of drivers to do the job. How did it get to this point?
I think we always known that there was going to be a problem after Brexit, but what's been happening recently is that retailers have been talking about the shortage of drivers. Anything that needs to move has had problems being moved, so the manufacturers are also complaining about parts not arriving in factories. So we've known for quite some time that we have a big shortage of HGV drivers. The number is calculated as something like 100,000, and that is major. So if it is affecting large part of the economy, then you can see that impact there already in empty shelves, for example. But what hadn't been anticipated is that it was also going to be affecting the supply of petrol in garages. And that happened rather suddenly, but just one announcement by BP originally that it had some problems with drivers not being able to service its forecourts. And that was mentioned and widely reported, with the result, of course, that people started getting worried and there was a lot of panic buying that took place. But in reality, what it has left the population with is this feeling that things are not being properly planned for, and also that communication about the issue is not really working in a way that could perhaps alleviate some of that panic buying by giving a bit of security that, yes, indeed, wait, tomorrow it's all going to be fine. But now nobody really knows how quickly the whole situation will be solved. And Brexit is considered to be a major factor in this because so many of our drivers have left and for the moment haven't come back.
It's interesting, though, because Boris Johnson's government has tried to downplay the Brexit element in all this. It says that it's got to do with the pandemic, that many drivers transitioned out of the job during the pandemic, that a lot of people have retired, others went home because of the health crisis. Do you agree? How much is Brexit a factor in all this?
I think all those factors matter. There's no doubt that it's almost like a perfect storm. A number of things have happened during COVID, and also we didn't have the whole system of licenses operating, and they've been long and burdensome. The answer is not, of course, to make the driving a lot more dangerous by making the tests a lot less rigorous. What the supply of workers from Europe had always done is allowed extra work at the margin. In other words, you wouldn't get to those shocks when you didn't have enough people, because you could always bring people in from elsewhere. Now, that isn't happening as easily. These other problems were there anyway, but of course, Brexit has made it worse. That does not mean that we don't see something similar happening, but not to that extent in other countries in Europe. We have emerged from the lockdown in a way that has encouraged a lot of spending, a lot of demand, and the economy generally hasn't been able to cope. But this extra factor has made the situation in the UK worse than it is in other countries.
In order to address the current crisis, the UK government has announced plans to grant 5,000 temporary workers' visas to foreign drivers. It also wants to grant 5,500 visas for foreign poultry workers. Do you think that'll be enough to stem this crisis and address this shortage?
Well, the industry is saying it isn't going to be enough. But of course, we've known for a while that agricultural workers were in short supply, and therefore we did need to bring in more people. There had already been a number of extra visas given, seasonal visas for that, and perhaps a bit of extra might work in that area. But in terms of lorry drivers more generally, the market, and certainly anyone who's involved in this, is telling us that that isn't going to be enough, and that we need probably many, many more. And also the fact that some of these visas are going to be temporary suggests that there isn't going to be that big of an uptake, because people won't want to abandon whatever they're doing in their own countries and just come here for a few months, however much they get paid during the period they're doing this. I think there is a need for a radical rethink of how we move things around, and also the conditions in the UK, which tend to be slightly worse if you're a truck driver than is the case in many parts of the EU.
Okay, Vicky Pryce from the Centre for Economics and Business Research. It's really good to get your analysis. Thank you so much again for joining us.